I used to hear people scream and shout at children saying, "You should show me respect." And it very quickly dawned on me that you can't scream and shout at somebody asking for respect. You actually have to earn it.
Hi and welcome to Lead Well.
Yay, today I have a wonderful person with me, and that is Leysa Henderson. And Leysa is a fellow trust technique practitioner and also assessor and mentor. But Leysa is much more than that. So we often have conversations also about my horse, Maggie, and how to deal with her. And during one of those conversations, I had a really interesting aha moment with you, Leysa, because you talked about your way of leadership. And I found that so fascinating that I really want you to share that with the world, because I had not seen that in any of the managers and leadership trainings that I have gone through. So welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us a bit more about, I think you called that benevolent leadership, and I'm sure I mispronounced that.
Benevolent leadership. Well, it's a very big area. So if I start at the beginning, it was really through teaching. And when I first started teaching, I was wondering about what kind of relationship I'm going to have with the children.
Mm-hmm.
You're not a sister, you're not a mother, you're not an aunt, you're not a grandmother. You're trying to find your way. And the other second thing was, how do I sustain a positive relationship all year? You have to remember that children are forced to come to school and they're forced to do this work.
Mm-hmm.
And you want them to come with you. They're not being paid. They don't have the motivation. Some do because they're naturally keen learners and they're naturally curious. But there's a lot who end up at the school. They've got lots of problems. They've got lots of issues. They've got lots of things going on at home that they are trying to cope with. And they turn up in your classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about building that relationship with them. And I used to hear people sort of scream and shout at children saying, "You should show me respect." And it very quickly dawned on me that you can't scream and shout at somebody asking for respect. You actually have to earn it.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter if you're a teacher, you have to earn it. And it also dawned on me that there are people in positions of power who, because they're in a position of power, they actually think they deserve that respect. And I kept asking myself, how am I going to earn that respect? What do I have to do to create a sustainable relationship, earn their respect, and also want them to want to learn and come with me? I had no idea of leadership. I'd never done anything like that before, but I really wanted to understand it. So that was where my learning started. And I got it wrong along the way, but also I started to get it right. And it was about learning when you got it right.
Mm-hmm.
So benevolent leadership, it is so big. I sort of not quite sure how to start with that. But it's like Christine and I, you were talking about how do we, in the trust technique, work with our animals where we are not forcing them to do what we want them to do. Mm-hmm. It's all about that trusted cooperation, as the trust technique refers to. So how did I do it? Well, I learned that the respect was one of them. I had to listen to them. It's so important to listen to them because so many children don't get heard. And then even things, small things like in the morning when they would come in, you'd ask them how their aunt was, their uncle was, how did they get on with the book? Show an interest in them, care for them, genuinely care for them. Mm-hmm. And it's not always easy because sometimes you have children in the class that you don't particularly connect with. And that's when I had to work harder. But those children were the ones that set me up the most challenges because I was determined never to have those favorites and the ones that you dislike, that I wanted to treat them all the same. Mm-hmm. But how do you do that? Well, learn about them, understand their position, understand where they're coming from. And to do that again is going back to the listening. It was about getting them to buy into what you were doing and making it so that you broke the process down with them, that you understood their ability. Because if you made it too hard, and then I observed classes where the lesson was far too difficult, The children had got lost, and then the teachers would get cross with them for not understanding. I reversed that. If they didn't understand, then it was my fault. I hadn't explained it to them in their format. I hadn't broken it down in a way that made sense for them. It was very important that at the end of each section, so when we did a literacy section, I would ask them for feedback. I think there are too many people who are frightened of feedback from people that they see as their workforce. Don't be frightened of the feedback. Ask them. Because when you ask somebody something, they feel valued. So I asked them what they felt had worked for them, what had helped them actually progress, to actually be able to write. And I asked them what didn't work for them. And I also asked them, what else could I do? And I would listen to them, and we would write it down, and we would try it, and then we would do the feedback loop again. And they would say, yeah, that didn't work, Miss Henderson, let's move on, let's try something else. It was also about having some fun with them. There were times they worked really hard, and it was times to just close the door, put the chairs out, and just play musical chairs, or have a karaoke, or do a dance. It's so important to have some fun with them. And again, people are terrified of, I saw teachers who nail kids to the chair because they were frightened of them being out. They were frightened of losing that control. And what I really learned was the more I gave them, empowered them, and gave them control, the less I had to, because actually they came along with me. I didn't feel the need to then push them. They just followed me. So my analogy is I wasn't pushing them uphill. I wasn't pushing a rock uphill. I was actually walking along with them, following behind me. It's so much easier. Give them that independence. Give them that free thinking. Speak to them like they're human beings, not little children, not lesser beings. And you have to remember, you're stuck in a classroom all day with all these different behaviors, these different characteristics. And you have to manage each one in a way that you are caring for all of them, but you're also having to be clear that these are the boundaries. They can't overstep those boundaries, because we have to keep everyone safe and everyone happy.
Yeah, I think that was the one point that also made it so clear for me, because yes, you show them understanding, and yes, you care. And at the same time, you are establishing those boundaries that everyone is aware of.
They needed to be there. They needed to be clear. And so like in the animal world as well, when you want to praise them for something, it has to be quick, because they have to understand what they're being praised for. And I did that with the children. The moment they did something that was a little bit different to them, but was being kind, or that they were actually achieving something, you immediately say, well done. I noticed you did that. But I think it's really important not just to say well done. It's important to say what they did well, because then they can repeat it again. If you get this vacuous well done, that was really good, you're thinking, well, which part was really good? I don't know which one to repeat again. And it's the same with animals. You know, if you recognize about 5 minutes later, or even 3 minutes later, what they did was good, they don't associate it. They don't associate with what they did. And also with very challenging children, you'd have to really be quick at catching them being good and pointing it out.
Oh, wow. Were they perhaps difficult because they had a lack of self-esteem then?
It was a combination of a lot of things. Some of them had very challenging homes, and some of them had come over and had lost their homes, come to the UK. Some of them were just struggling with self-esteem was one of them, but also being able to cope with the work. If you think about it, if you're struggling with the work, if you're bored at work or struggling with the work, there's a sense of stress if you're struggling with it. And with boredom, you start to switch off. And then you become distracted with anything. And of course, when they are so young and impressionable, they don't have the mental facility to be able to calm themselves down.
And it's interesting you say, because while you were talking, I mean, you have a lot of experience with children and with animals. And I was thinking, you can translate everything one-to-one in a work environment as well, because yeah, you want to have a sustainable relationship, but you want to have respect as well. You want your people to go to work and really enjoy coming to work. You want to be able to listen to them. And you underlined that several times. Listening really is an important skill to have. And any type of leaders. And I love the way you say, well, you need to show them you care and show them your interest and give them feedback and act on the feedback. And also give feedback really quickly so that they understand, and also very specific so that they understand what it is and they can link it back to that immediately. I love it. That's why I said this could be a management 101 for any leader in any environment, not necessarily only in school or with our pets. And isn't it fantastic that it seems like leadership works the same way all over?
It is, and it has to be genuine. And the one thing that I've learned, because I worked with a lot of teachers who were struggling with behavioural and being able to teach, and I realised that unless they really wanted to be a good leader, unless they really were striving for that, it was going to be hard to get them to change. There were some people who just, because they felt the fear, and I do feel that a lot of teachers who wanted to control everything and keep the children subdued, it was all about their own fear of letting go. And yet the power of being a good teacher was actually letting go and trusting that they will come with you rather than dragging them with you. And when you did that, it made the relationship so much more powerful. And I learnt masses from them. And they felt they could come and talk to me. And if I felt also I had a strong enough relationship with them, that if I felt I had got something wrong, I could apologize to them.
So you didn't lose respect for
No.
making mistakes.
In fact, it made it more powerful because they respected that I had acknowledged that I got it wrong, rather than children will feel a sense of injustice very keenly. And if you've been unfair to them, they will cling to it. Whereas if you say to them, look, yesterday, I perhaps hadn't got all the information and I apologize. I didn't really take time to listen. I was a bit tired. I was a bit grumpy and I shouldn't have done it that way. Let's have a conversation now. They will forgive you and they will move on. And also you can then, I'm loath to use the word demand, but you can ask it from them when you feel that they've overstepped the mark with another child. You can say, it would be nice if you could apologize to them. And remember how you felt when I apologized to you. I really, truly believe you can't ask from them if you're not willing to do it yourself.
Yeah. So walk the talk and you go first, as we say.
Yeah. Model, model, model. If you want the children to be kind to people who come to your class, every time somebody comes into your class, you be kind to them. And after a while, they pick up on that behavior. People start to mimic behavior. No matter how old or young you are, people will start to pick up on that behavior. So whatever you want around you, you have to model it.
Yeah. And they will pick up on your behavior, not on your words.
Yeah, absolutely. They watch, they're very observant, and they will pick up on your behavior. And you, even that subtle raising your eyes to the ceiling, you might not think that it doesn't count for much, but they've seen it. And if somebody's seen you raise your eyes to the ceiling, there's an element of respect that just a little bit that they've lost. Chipping away. If you keep doing the wrong things, it chips away, which is why you've got to fill your bank as well. You've got to fill your pot of good stuff that when you do get it wrong, you're not losing too much. But if you just keep doing the wrong thing, then your pot will be empty.
Wow.
But even it ran, as regards to modelling, when we were doing a literacy unit, I would make sure that I've written that piece. So I've understood what the process they've had to go through. I've understood the language they need, the sentence structure they need, the text structure they need, what information they needed to be able to write this, how to develop it, how to edit it. And I've been through all of that. Absolutely make sure. And I would never, again, never ask them to do something I hadn't already done myself. And then I would put it up and we would critique it. We would pull it apart. And they were so positive, but they would also add so much. So ask your team for help. Don't be too ashamed to ask your team for help. It creates such a strong relationship.
Because at the end of the day, we can learn from everyone, even if it's children, even if it's people who have a completely different background from us.
Yeah, absolutely. And never ever rule somebody out. So I had some twins in my class one year, and they came up about 3 years behind their grade. And they always thought themselves to be lower than everybody else, sort of less worthy of anyone else, less intelligent. And actually, as time went on, I realized that the problem was that they were dyslexic. And everyone judges people on how they read. What I realized is their level of understanding of the world was phenomenal, because one of the areas I love doing with the kids was discussion. I'd put something controversial up on the board and we'd have a discussion. And those two would come up with some profound and insightful remarks that the whole class would be, wow, that's incredible. And they went up 3 years in 6 months. And it was all about their confidence and self-belief. Because when they started to realize that actually they were clever, or they were very capable, and they started to believe in themselves, they just accelerated.
I can so relate to what you just said in the other direction, because it happened to me twice in my corporate life, that my abilities were challenged and I felt so unable to do things in a very, very short period of time. I mean, it took me only like a week or two, and I started making mistakes because I lost my confidence. It's really, really quick. And it's so great to hear that the other way around, it works as well.
That is so common, because lots of people used to say to me, well, how do you get your class to have such great progress? And I couldn't really understand it. But one of the most important things was to build their confidence. And once they had confidence, then they would actually lead themselves. And that's effectively what I wanted them all to do. I wanted them all to be little leaders of their own education, of how they develop. And I had a class where nearly 2/3 of them were 2, if not 3 years behind. And every single child passed their exams at the end of the year, every single one of them. And all I did was just build their confidence. And to do that, you have to trust them, trust that they can do it, believe in their potential. If you don't believe in their potential, well, you're going to get nothing out of them.
Because if you don't show them that belief, they cannot gain that belief themselves.
No, because they're relying on you to do that.
Yeah.
And there was one little boy, he was very far behind, and I was teaching an area of grammar, and he was saying, oh, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this, Miss Henderson. And I just looked at him and said, do you think I would be teaching you this if I didn't think you could do it?
Wow.
And he said, no. I said, so do you trust me? He said, yes. So shall we go in with an open mind and see if we can do it? And he could do it. And he was beaming from ear to ear. And he just went from strength to strength. And it is all about believing in them, trusting in them, but also getting them to believe and trust you. That is vital.
Yeah.
You don't have to be soft. It's not about giving in to them, but it's about being clear with the boundaries. These are the rules. And when they step over them, these are the consequences.
So how would you react if some child would do something not appropriate?
Well, it would depend what the appropriate or inappropriateness was. I never shouted, never raised my voice, because that wasn't needed. So if I give you an example of, I had a class that were incredibly challenging, and I went away on a course for a day. I heard that the next day they had actually run riot in the class. It took 5 adults, including the deputy head, the assistant head, to go in, take them out 2 by 2 and go and deposit them in other classes. So how do you deal with a whole class that's run amok and they've realized they can run amok? And I walked in and I said nothing to them. I didn't engage with them. I didn't look at them. Normally I walk in and say, oh, how was that book? Did you enjoy that? That's a brilliant bit. Normally I was really sort of chatty, didn't speak to them at all. They sat down in complete silence. They all got their books out. Nobody said a word. No one spoke. I took the register. It was absolutely hushed. And very quietly, I just said, you know, I'm annoyed, don't you? Yes, they all nodded. Why am I cross? And I said, we weren't very well behaved yesterday. That's an understatement. I said, why do you think I'm cross? And they said, because you care for us and we didn't make you proud of us.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes, and I know this sounds awful, but it was a bit like emotional blackmail.
Mm-hmm.
You've really upset me by behaving that way. And they really don't want to go there again.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to let you down.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's really moving.
Kids are very special and they teach us a lot about ourselves.
That's wonderful. So, what kind of teachers or leaders did you have in your life? Do you have anyone that stood out for you?
We're all different, aren't we? Some people like to be managed a lot more, but I don't like being managed. I like to be given that space, which is why I used to give the children the space. I would say that one of my head teachers, who I didn't really have much engagement with, but I knew she'd got my back. I knew if a parent had complained or anything like that, she'd got my back. She also learnt about me, even if it was through other teachers and other feedback. She got to know my strengths and my weaknesses, and she would put me on courses that would develop me. She trusted me, so I started to have to train the teachers. Every 3 weeks, I was having to do another inset session. It was hard work, and there was a lot of times I was sort of running on panic, but I knew that I had a team around me that would not criticize me. They were on my side. I grew so much with her because she didn't interfere. She didn't micromanage. I knew she knew about me. She didn't do it in your face way. And she knew how to develop me. And I absolutely sort of love her for that. And I would have followed her every inch of the way because I knew she cared as well.
I mean, she did exactly what you then did with the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think we need to create independent analytical learners, and they need to be able to challenge us. And I was up for that. They would challenge me. They would say, but you said this and this happened the other day, and are we supposed to be doing that? And we would have the most deep conversations. They weren't rude or disrespectful in their challenges in any way, but I wanted them to do that. And then I would do that with them when they came in with a comment that I felt, in my own personal opinion, was maybe ignorant or misogynistic or racist or anything like that. I would question them. And in a way that we could then discuss it, and they would start to understand that perhaps their behavior wasn't the greatest.
Yeah. Wow. So you also had to be very consistent. Whatever you said would really be challenged.
Yes. And I think consistency is a really good thing to actually bring up. I think in any form of leadership, there is nothing worse than somebody being unpredictable, particularly your leader, if you don't know what's going to happen next. So one day you do one thing and it's fine, and the next day you do the same thing and it's not. It makes you feel very stressed. So for me, consistency in everything you say and do and the way you behave is really important. You can't be nice to half of the children, not nice to the other half of the children, because that's inconsistent. And then you're demonstrating that you can pick and choose. And that's not leadership.
Wow. Such profound insights. Thank you so much for sharing those. So there is one question I always ask at the end of each interview, and that is, what is it that you are doing for yourself to keep healthy, to keep sane? Because I know being a teacher is not an easy job. It's pretty demanding. So is there any little secret that you can share with us? Anything that you do to keep yourself healthy?
Well, leave teaching probably was one of them. So I did leave teaching quite a few years ago. And because I loved the time in the class with children, and I loved the other members of staff, and I loved all that. But the pressure to constantly get them to achieve and do things that I didn't feel comfortable with just started to weigh heavily on me. I pushed things back as much as I could from them to keep them protected and tried to make the exams as much fun. But there's only so much you can do. And I got tired. And it's a good question because I did get tired, but it wasn't the leadership or any of that. It was all the other work I had to do as well on top of it that I just ran out of steam. I do think that it's very important that people say no. They say, no, this is too much, and be honest with people instead of absorbing, oh, more and more stress. This is something I did. I just, oh, yes, I can do that. Oh, yes, I can do that. But actually what I needed to do is say, I would love to do it, but I do not have the space. If you want me to do that, what do you want to take out? You can't keep adding to it.
Wow. Well, I could talk to you for hours and hours, as we've already have, because you're so full of wisdom. It's always so great to have you. So thank you so much. And yeah, I think there's so many nuggets of gold that you have shared with us today. That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on this show. Thanks, Leysa.
Well, you're very welcome, Christine. And I've been listening to your podcast, and I absolutely concur with everything that you've been talking about. They're all fundamental, and that all of those were part and parcel of how I taught. So it's lovely to hear your wisdom as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This was Lead Well. Now, what is the one thing that you're taking away from this episode? Please share in the comments below, and do share the podcast with your friends and family, but only if you like it.